What's good, man? It's your boy Jamal Gasol. You now locked in on the Renaissance Show. Let's go.
All right, you guys are now tuned in to the Renaissance Show. My name is Alex Kuchma, and I have here with me yet another incredible guest. This time, we have someone from Niagara Falls, New York. I don't think we've had anyone from Niagara on so far, but we've spoken to a lot of people that you end up collaborating with. This dude, if you're familiar at all with this scene, you're tapped in week by week by week, and you're listening to this music, you're going to be familiar with the name. If you clicked on the web series, you know who we're talking to. But I have on the line Jamal Gasol. What's good, my dude?
What's good? What's good with you?
Oh man, everything's good on my end here. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you. I've been a fan for quite some time, a couple years anyhow, and I've been tuned into I guess the weekly rap schedule anyways over the last couple years, and your name comes up all the time. If you're not dropping an EP or a full length project, you're featured on somebody else's material, and you're so integral to this scene. And I don't think Niagara ends up getting enough attention. We end up talking a lot about places like Buffalo, and Buffalo is definitely kind of capitalized among this, say, upstate New York underground rap scene. We talk about Rochester a fair amount as well, but Niagara is really, really important for what's going on. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be able to sit down and have this conversation with you. I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your day.
No doubt, no doubt.
So you have a new project out. It's called the Novelty of Standards, and this is a really, really solid project. It's short, so if you guys are watching this on the web series, and I say this all the time, but it's worth repeating. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, take the time, pause this video, and listen to the project. It's really short. It's like 12, 13 minutes long, super short, small little EP, and then resume and resume this conversation, because I think I think the music is dope and it's worthy of listening to, but I also think it provides fairly crucial kind of context for what we're about to talk about. But this project, man, wow! Like I said, I've been a fan of yours for a fair amount of time, and you've dropped a lot recently, right? Even the Oxtail project, which when did that drop? A month and a half ago, 2 months ago, something like really, really recently. This album impresses
Yeah.
me, and that's hard to do when you have this quality standard that you abide to every release. And I listen to something like this, and it blows me away. This shit is fantastic. So first off, I just wanted to congratulate you on the art and thank you for the contribution to this hip hop thing, because
Thank you.
this shit's great.
Thank you. I appreciate you for having me and taking the time to listen to
Man,
this, man. I really took my time with this project, man. That's the whole title, the Novelty of Standards. That's like the change of persona, like the level up. So I just wanted to definitely just step my shit up. You know what I mean?
yeah. So I guess there's a number of different ways that we can end up going into this here, but talk about, yeah, I guess that, and stepping up, and how this ends up comparing to some of the previous projects that you've ended up putting out, because you've done a lot. Your discography at this point is stacked, and you've done a lot recently as well, as we talk about, like the Oxtail project just ended up coming out recently. But this album here, I do think it, like a track like What You Are, for example, it's the closing track off the record. That shit is incredible. It's going to end up being one of my favorite songs of the year, no doubt. How do you end up approaching a project like this any different than previous projects that you've been a part of?
Well, I feel like overall production plays a big part. Production plays a big part for me because
Yeah,
music controls the mood. So a lot of the music is the mood that it created as I heard it and what came wrote down. So like certain songs, you can't have energy. You can't have the same energy on every song. It's a different energy for every track. Every mood is different. Every song is a
sure.
different vibe, a different feeling or emotion out of you. You know what I'm saying? So approaching this project, me and Bass had a small chemistry. I did like a track or two for him before, and that's my boy's brother. That's my boy Sauce Heist's brother. So I had known him for some years now. We've been talking about doing a project, man, because I'm like, yo, this dude production is crazy. Like, yo, what you doing, man? Let's get on some stuff, you know what I mean? And we just took our time with it, prolonged on it, and he sent me the joint, and no lie, man, I did that tape. He sent me the song. He sent me one of the beats. Actually, I recorded it that day. He
Yeah.
sent me like five more beats. I did them all that day. that project out like in a short matter of time, going back over editing. Because while I'm working on projects, I'm already working on Oxtail. I just dropped Blackball at the time. I got more True Stories coming still. So I'm working on a lot of music. I got Stir the Pot going on. So I'm keeping my blade sharp. But that production just was like, yo, keep it top tier. Keep that same energy.
And it spoke to you. Yeah, man, it's incredible that artists like yourself, and I don't think you're alone in this conversation, but you guys are able to be so prolific and release so much material and record on such kind of short notice and do a project like you said. This album is recorded in a day. That's mind-boggling. Like there's so many layers to this album. It doesn't sound like it's recorded in a day. It sounds like you've taken your time with it. It sounds like it's been mulled over and the writing took time. Like this is a really solid piece of art. And it in no way does it feel in no way does it feel rushed from an audience perspective. But you end up putting out so much material that realistically the audience has to end up understanding that you work quickly and clearly under pressure as well.
Absolutely. And Tom Brady under pressure.
Man, I want to talk about the Niagara Falls kind of connection because, like I said, this is the first time that we've had someone from Niagara Falls on the show, at least on the New York side. I research Canadian hip hop, and I research Canadian hip hop, and I'm writing a book on Canadian hip hop, and I speak to a lot of Canadian hip hop artists, and thus I've spoken to some people that are on, I guess, the Canadian side of the fence. But like I said earlier, I think Rochester and Buffalo end up getting a lot of shine, and rightfully so. Groups like Griselda or Trust or DeCloth, for example, out of Rochester. These are incredibly talented cats that deserve shine and deserve props. But at the same time, I do think Niagara is a little bit undervalued in what they've been able to bring to the table.
All the time.
Yeah. How do you feel over the last, say, because really over the last, say, 5-6 years, really maybe 2015, the start of that kind of Griselda movement, that's when we started seeing hip hop's eyes being reoriented towards upstate New York. Because before that, there wasn't really a lot of attention being given to that kind of region. And since 2015, again, the attention has just been given towards these other locations. How have you kind of felt that Niagara has been kind of treated, I guess, over this last few year period?
Well, honestly, I feel like with them opening the door and bringing the attention, it was like the perfect opportunity for anybody who was already paying attention to make the right connections and network.
Yeah.
Like I knew Benny for years, you know what I mean? I knew Benny before that Griselda really came into picture. Like I heard of West Side Gun back in 2012. My man put me on the West Side Gun. Then I knew who Hus Kingpin was too. I just wasn't paying attention to them as much because their sound wasn't what was being accepted or quote unquote in at the time. So I heard of these guys before. I just didn't know they was really gonna come up the way they came up, you know what I mean? Like I slept on them because it was like they were still there. So when they picked up eventually, and I was rapping in the sense of like doing everything here and there, but I was still on the same wave that they're on and I'm on at this time. So taking advantage of like, yo, they doing it, I gotta get my music out there. I gotta pump. Like that just inspired me to step my game up, you know what I mean, to really get out there and network. You know what I'm saying? Like, mind you, I had caught a case during all of this too, so I was facing prison time at a point where, you know, I had to really focus on if you're gonna do this shit or not. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, how close connected is those kind of three areas? Let it be specifically Rochester, Buffalo, and Niagara Falls. Before this thing kind of popped up, and I know it seems like everyone's kind of a family at this point in time, right? Even in Toronto, people like Daniel Son and Future Wave, these guys are actively contributing to this kind of scene or this wave, this new Renaissance period that we're in, and the collaborations are immense. But prior to this scene kind of developing into what it is, you guys are operating on a local level. You guys are kind of a local hip hop scene. There's open mic nights, and you guys are trying to end up coming up and doing your thing in the most organic way as possible. At that period of time, before this, say, Griselda push, how frequent were the collaborations, and how close were those communities? Was the hip hop scene in Niagara Falls synonymous basically with the hip hop scene that was going on in Buffalo and Rochester, or were you guys kind of separate entities?
There was a little bit of both. That's a good question because a lot of people don't talk about that. Like there was like a little like animosity, I would say, like maybe a little rivalry between cities, like from small things. Like it goes back to like little loot sports and stuff like that, where we would go to Buffalo, as like from Niagara Falls, and play against teams from Buffalo, or going to Rochester and playing teams, and people be repping their hoods, their blocks and stuff like that. It turned into cities when you going out of town though. So you know what I mean? Buffalo done came to Niagara Falls and got into fights. So people see each other later on, and then like some people grow up, some people still childish or have their ways to them. Where like Buffalo is definitely more of the open mic city. Go to Buffalo and catch an open mic night. They used to do them all the time back in the day. You was more likely to get a chance to perform out there than you would in Niagara Falls. But I want to give a shout out to Tony Boy. Tony Boy definitely plays a part in bridging that gap as far as like Buffalo, Rochester, Niagara Falls, even Toronto. You know
How
what I'm
so?
saying?
I've
From
spoken to
bringing us,
Tony Boy,
bringing us.
and his project with Gaines is fantastic. But how is he in this mix?
He's in the mix because he was doing a lot of the shows, man. Him and my boy DJ Ruckus, man. RP to DJ Ruckus. They was bringing them boys over from Canada and doing them shows at Milky's and the other spot in Buffalo. They was setting them shows up. You know what I mean? So they definitely played a part. Tony Boy, he introduced me to Deuce. Deuce, I met Deuce in Buffalo, but because of him having that show with us in the same building, that was how we met. Same with Rome Streets. Same with JUCO. You know what I mean? I met a lot of these people on the strength of the Tony Boy show. So he played a big part as far as like getting people to link and collaborate, and even getting us all in the same room at a point. So
Wow, yeah, that's something I had no idea. Tony Boy's name, I loved his art, right? The music that he ends up making is fantastic, and that EP that he ended up doing recently, I think it came out maybe earlier in the year, anyhow, with Gaines. I love it's one of my favorite projects of 2021, and it's something that I end up going back to consistently. That being said, I almost never hear anyone actually talk about Tony Boy. Um, Within the industry, I hear his name talked about a little bit. People like yourself, they'll end up mentioning the name, but I don't really see the audience really paying respect as they should, because the dude's incredible as an artist tip as well, not just someone that's hosting events and kind of connecting people behind the scenes. His art
well,
is amazing.
he does a lot behind the scenes though. He does more than just rap though. So you know what I mean? Like he does a lot. Like
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like I'll let him explain for himself one day, but I can tell you, every Jamal Gasol project you heard, he engineered for the last year,
Wow.
except Novelty of Standards and Octel. Everything else, he from the World is Piff to all the Stir the Pots. I mean, most of the Stir the Pots. There's one that more true stories. He did a lot of them. Definitely engineered a lot of songs for me.
That's amazing. When we talk about Niagara Falls and I guess this region as a whole, how oriented is it towards New York City? Because I feel like there's always that push to go to New York City, right? Brooklyn, Manhattan. These are like the Bronx. These are hip hop birthplace. It's kind of the mecca of the culture in a lot of ways. It really is, and at least on a Canadian tip, I interview a lot of people in Toronto, and you see this a lot more so back in the day when you talk to artists like Citizen Kane or Thrust, or a lot of these cats that kind of came up in the '90s in Toronto. They were going down to they were going down to New York City in order to build collaborations, to network, and to try to make something of their career beyond strictly that kind of Toronto hip hop identity or Canadian hip hop identity. They were trying to latch onto something bigger and greater by going to New York City. I feel like if you're in New York as a New York State, almost regardless of where you are, you're going to feel compelled to make that trip to the city in order to build those connections and kind of experience the same, basically do the same thing that I see a lot of the Toronto cats doing in the '90s. How how much was that, I guess, realized in a place like Niagara Falls? And do you feel like that ever kind of robbed the local scene to some degree, that people maybe weren't focused on developing and curating a local scene because they were within proximity to a place like New York City, and that was where the attention was at? Like, how much do you feel like that affected the local scene in Niagara?
I honestly feel it didn't affect the local scene where I'm at because it's still artists that's still content with like taking over just the town. You know what I mean? They feel like having Niagara Falls on lock is the biggest thing in the world to some people. You know what I mean? There's some people's
Gotcha.
goals, some people's dreams to have the local scene on lock. They think some people never saw me. Nobody went as far as I'm going. You know what I'm saying? Like all jokes aside, I'm probably the furthest a rapper from Niagara Falls has went. You know what I mean? We've had other people come along like Fonz Carter and Wednesday Adams doing their thing, but these are people you probably never heard of. But you know, being from Niagara Falls, you hear about people and if you really focus on your goals and stuff like that, you'll remember the people that was before you. You know what I mean? Like we have football players, basketball players that went to the league, went to big colleges and stuff like that. But we had people before them as well that was setting examples. So the example that's being set is to take over the town, have your city behind you. That's what a lot of the people are doing. So like going to New York City really wasn't that big of a thing. Like you was
Sure.
different if you went to New York City. Like I'm going to New York City, people looking at that as like, oh, you big time. That's small, you know what I mean? And that's not big to people. Like you can go down to New York City and perform at a 5 people audience, you know what I mean? And people had the impression that you was in New York City. But it's just the fact of taking that chance of expanding your fan base is what separates you from everybody else. Do you want to deal with just one city or do you want to get the world?
Sure. You talk about some of the, I guess, foundations or the examples that would have ended up coming prior to you. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I'm really not too familiar with the history of Niagara Falls hip hop. I know when I interview people in, say, a place like London, Ontario, or Saskatoon, or kind of these off the grid markets, they may end up having thriving hip hop scenes, but the world hasn't really paid attention to what they've been doing. The history there is often immense, right? It stems from local
Hmm.
hip hop shops, college radio, open mic nights, which we briefly touched upon earlier. There really is kind of a lived hip hop community in these places, and I think community is a term that gets stressed a lot in these conversations. Um, when you think of kind of the early roots of Niagara Falls and the culture there, who are you thinking of in terms of maybe a local radio DJ that put a lot of people on, or I don't know, just people that were kind of actively involved in creating that community space before you?
Well, I would definitely take it. I would go. Well, I can start from the beginning, man. As far as I was born, I'm only 30, so I would My
Sure.
uncle Chill Will was a big DJ. I always mention him. I always tell everybody about him because he's well known for the music scene in Niagara Falls. Like it goes back then. He used to have a studio off of Main Street. They had the Hot to Death joint. They had Fonz Carter. They had Big Miz. They had Pooh. They had a couple other artists, man. They definitely had people though. And from there was All Point Entertainment, and then my cousin Scorch, Will Scorch, my cousin, he was rapping around then. And then groups like DNA and Hot Spitters came out. And those became like the top two groups in the falls. Like it was also another group called Rasta Fam when I was a kid too. Like Rasta Fam was a group of dudes that was rappers. And it was the difference to me when I grew up. Like I know the difference between a rapper and an MC. Everybody says the same thing. It's really not.
Sure.
A lot of people weren't MCs. A lot of people were just rappers. So the rappers was the bigger thing to be. Like the MCs was a certain breed of people, certain select few of men that was really coming with bars. Like, you know what I'm saying? All these rappers just make a song because our influence was the radio. We didn't have nobody like, we didn't have no big stars coming out of Niagara Falls. You know what I'm saying? As far as even on the music tip, the closest we had was Tracy. Everett, I believe he just passed away. That's my god brother Furby's uncle. But I forgot what group he was with. He was in I think an old music video that was on BET. I can't even name it. But like I said, the history of Niagara Falls is based on rappers, not really MCs. So Benny and them pushing the door coming out as MCs, and now they looking for that up here. Now it's time. Like you see Special getting out there, Riggs getting out there. You know what I'm saying? Like Ito.
Yeah.
So it was just mad rappers. It wasn't many MCs. Like.
Yeah, that's fair. When you talk about these cats, because I haven't heard a lot of the names that you ended up mentioning, of course, like 38 Special or Ito. I've heard of because they're kind of current modern rappers and MCs, but a lot of the earlier names that you were throwing out, I don't really know what they even sounded like. Aesthetically, where was the city? Was it kind of geared towards the New York City sound and the kind of that dusty kind of boom bap New York hip hop that we kind of fell in love with from afar, or were you guys kind of doing something a little bit unique or different stylistically, aesthetically in terms of the music? Before this new
Like
wave.
maybe 2000, yeah, before this new wave really came about, there was a group called Lather Gang. It's my cousin Rico, Coach, PZ, they Peacoat. They got a song called Straight Fucking. That song is big up here. Like Griselda knows it. Everybody in Griselda. If you from Buffalo, you heard Straight Fucking when you was in the club, and that's them, Niagara Falls. Like Happy used to book them for shows and shit. So right around like 2017, 18, like when Fly God came out,
Yeah.
was when everything changed over to that sound. But before that, it was like some turn up party shit. It was like on some Roscoe Dash, Travis Scott. You know what I'm saying? Niggas was just copying the radio. We were just trying to make a hit. Like, but
That kind of makes
yeah,
sense because if you listen to some of the older Griselda cuts, like you can go online, you can view a lot of the shit that Conway was putting out, or Benny was putting out in kind of 2008, 2009, that kind of era, and it's so drastically different from what Griselda, I guess,
way
embodies or
different,
represents now. And you see
way different.
maybe a few glimpses towards that, right? Something like La Maquina by Conway has songs on there that maybe kind of hint at his appreciation for that sound, but it's still so far removed from that sound that he was doing prior. So you're saying that sound that I'm kind of thinking of, that early Griselda stuff before they became popular, that's what you ended up seeing a lot in Niagara as well?
Yeah, with more of an up tempo, right?
Yeah, a little bit more kind of trappy
Mm-hmm.
oriented, something that you would imagine.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's kind of club
trap
music to a
music,
lot of
trap
degrees,
music.
less grungy, right?
That's the word, trap music. It was all trap music. Everybody was on trap music because like this is like they call this the South up here because it's quote unquote country compared to New York City. You know, people up here be having the two 12-inch subwoofers on 26s on a Grand Marquis or a Crown Vic riding through Tahoe on 26s with the beats playing. So we want
Yeah,
something
yeah,
that's knocking. When you want something that people bumping in the hood, like people ain't really bumping that slow beat. You know what I'm saying? Like they bumping that up tempo shit. So we wanted something that was knocking, and then let alone if you popping in the club, you get players in the club. We like, yeah, this is it. This is it. Like, okay, they fuck with it because they playing it in the club, but it ain't. That's just us chasing acceptance, man. It's not. We wasn't true to what we really wanted to be at them times.
man, I really appreciate you taking the time to illuminate some of this kind of rich history of upstate New York in general. This is an area like over in 10, 20, 30 years. And I say this a lot, but I think that this new wave, this new music that's coming out over the last few years, I think that we're going to look back at this moment and say, hey, we had something special. And the amount of music that's coming out in this period of time, I think is going to provide people with a lifetime worth of music to go back to in a really meaningful way, in a similar way, I guess, as hip hop heads dig and find old kind of 90s rap from New York or kind of this random rap from different places of the United States, and we kind of idolize that and we look for those gems. I think this scene and what we've kind of curated over the last few years, I think people are going to look back at it in the same sort of way. But upstate New York in general is going to be capitalized in that. It's going to be the place of focus, of admiration. And I don't think there's a lot of conversation about the roots of those communities and those cultures. I think like there's definitely a book here somewhere. All right, like somebody should take the time to write a book about the history of Niagara Falls hip hop, Buffalo hip hop, Rochester hip hop, and this kind of upstate hip hop, upstate New York community that's thrived over the years and became what it became in 2015. Because I think for most people, the scene started in 2015, but we obviously know that's not the case. There's a book here somewhere. Are you still there?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So again, once again,
No
thank you
book
so
here.
much. Yeah. Once, thank you for taking the time to kind of illuminate that history. Again, for those listening at home, Jamal Gasol on the line. He has it's a brand new project out called The Novelty of Standards. It's available on all streaming platforms, let it be Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, etc. Where can people buy this project if they wanted to support you directly? Are you planning on putting this out on vinyl or CD or tape? What's the kind of route in terms of distribution for this release? Is it going to remain just digitally only? What's going on here?
No, I got it available on CD right now at jamalgasol.com.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Vinyls are in discussion as we speak right now. Yeah, but CDs are available right now.
Gotcha. The vinyl kind of discussion. Are you planning on shopping that to a different distributor? Let it be like the Rap Winkle or Tough Kong or something of that kind of nature, or are you planning on just doing this independently yourself?
Honestly, it depends on the offer. You know what I mean? Depends on how much I got to pay out of pocket opposed to what the label willing to give up front. You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
If it balances out and makes sense, it just saves me time. But if I got to do it myself, I won't mind either.
Gotcha. And I know this is the project that you're promoting. And again, I encourage people to take the time and listen to this project. It's only 13 minutes, and I truly think that this is going to be a project that you're going to fall in love with. And I could definitely end up seeing this appearing on like end of the year list come the end of the year, because there's some really solid songs off of this project. And it's short, it's concise, it's cohesive, and 13 minutes doesn't leave a lot of room for filler, and you have no filler on here. It's fire from front to back, and definitely an album that you can play over and over and over again without getting bored. That
Right.
said,
Repeat value.
100%. So 100%, you're promoting this project, and I acknowledge that, and I recognize that, and people should take the time and check that out. But what do you currently have on the go? You're an artist that seems to always be working and always putting out new material. What is currently on the plate in terms of, let's even say for the end of this year, maybe first quarter of 2022? What's currently in store?
Well, on my birthday, I'm dropping more true stories. That's December 29th. I'm about to drop. I'm doing 31 songs this whole month. I'm dropping three other songs aside from the
Oh
album.
shit.
I got two videos coming. Um, and then coming into 2022, I'm just gonna be dropping mad videos. Dropping videos. I
Man,
got a lot of music in the cut, man.
I'm I'm tapped in. Anything that you end up putting out, I'm a fan myself, and I always end up checking for new Jamal Gasol material and even future material. You're one of those names that you see on the blogs is, I don't know, featuring Jamal Gasol, and even if I'm not familiar with the artist, because you're on the record, I know that at the very least the artist that has you on has good taste in rap music, and I end up checking it out. You're one of those few cats that pique my interest to that degree. Once again, man, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a blast. I'd love to have you back on again in the future as well. Whenever you do end up having new material out, let it be for the radio show, the web series, or whatever I have going on at the time. Yeah, I'd love to keep this communication bridge open.
No doubt, man. Thank you for having me. I definitely appreciate the opportunity. What's good, man? It's your boy Jamal Gasol. You now locked in on the Renaissance Show. Let's go.